It's Not a Boy. Chapter 6, The Beautiful Rose, Part 3. In the last part, my dad would not pay attention to my worries about being beautiful. He was too busy on the farm. My tiara didn't work on my head because my hair was too fine, and he wasn't worried at all. Beauty comes from within, he said, as he rushed off to work on the farm, which was, after all, our livelihood. Irene smiled her gummy smile and said that it didn't matter, not to worry. Her sister was going to be a bridesmaid as well, and so she could wear the tiara and it wouldn't be wasted. So that was the end of that. And my dress was pulled off, and I stood on the table in my navy knickers, which I now knew were serviceable. I'd realised also that navy was not my mum's favourite colour. It was just that it didn't show the dirt. Irene pushed the tiara back in her bag. I watched it disappear and I felt so sad. But Irene smiled at me again, a real friendly gummy smile. "You look lovely in a bonnet," she said. "But a bonnet is not the same as a tiara, is it?" I ran to my tramp friend to cheer me up. Ha, ha. He was sitting in our straw and was very pleased to see me. And I took him some cheese and a mug of water again. And I told him about wanting to look beautiful for the wedding and make it my big day as a bridesmaid. He drained the mug to every last drop of water and licked his fingers and smacked his lips. He lifted that dirty cap of his and scratched his sticky out hair. "Beauty comes from within," he smiled, his cracked skin smile. "My dad said that." "Well, it's true. And in any case, you should not outshine the bride. The day is not yours. After all, it belongs to her." I sat down in the straw next to him and told him all about my new dress that Mum had made and all about my new peep-toe sandals. The big day came very quickly. After waiting for ages, suddenly we had to hurry to get ready. I got washed in our wash house while Mam put on a new costume, and then she pulled my dress carefully over my head, and then she tied my bonnet and I put my sandals on. I ran upstairs to look in the mirror. Well, I thought that I had done it at last. All the things together, my dress, my shoes, and even my bonnet, had changed me into a beauty in a flash. And if I didn't open my mouth when I smiled, you couldn't see the gap between my teeth. Everything was as perfect as it should be, except for one thing, and that was that we had no car. You see, Uncle Sid and Auntie Vera had taken the car to Hull to go shopping. It was their turn this weekend, and we had the van. Nobody had thought about that. We had to go to the wedding in a smelly van. Mum cleaned it out as best she could, but she'd already got dressed and was in a smart navy suit and didn't want that to get dirty. So we all had to go in and be careful not to dirty our clothes. Even Dad, in his dark funeral suit, ready for the wedding, had to be careful too. Then at Ringham we all piled out together at the church. And there were two surprises for me here. One was that Irene had picked me a posy of red roses, and I had to carry it, and it was beautiful, and she'd used a silver doily to wrap round it. And the other surprise was that her sister wasn't wearing the tiara. She was wearing a bonnet just like mine, only a little bit bigger. You see, Irene had told her sister how sad I was not to be wearing the tiara. So Sister thought it would be a good idea if the tiara went back to the shop in Hull, and she made a bonnet just like mine. Everybody went into the church, and we bridesmaids stood by the lich gate, just at the top of Church Lane. And we waited and waited for the bride. And I stared at the little lane, and then at the hedge and the scrubby wild rose which was growing not too far from the lich gate. It had pale pink flowers. It wasn't a patch on my bright red, beautiful roses. There was a crowd of villagers waiting to see the bride. But Irene was nowhere to be seen. Then all of a sudden an old man in a creased suit came puffing up the lane and past the wild rose to Irene's sister and me standing at the lich gate. He was Irene's dad, and he told us that the bride's old wedding car they had borrowed wouldn't start. He doubled up getting his breath back before racing into the church. Next thing we knew was that my dad rushed out of the church to get the bride in our van. Nobody had a car to bring Irene to church. If Irene was disappointed at coming in an old smelly van to get married, you would not know. She got out and she beamed her gummy buck-tooth smile, and she looked as if she could not have been more pleased, even if she'd been getting out of Helen's dad's posh smooth car instead of our whiffy old van. Irene seemed to glow as she walked up the aisle towards her groom. Her white silk dress was lovely, of course, and her veil and train made her look important. But it was her face that was beautiful. She looked more beautiful than anybody there. She was even more beautiful than me. Everybody kept saying how lovely I looked, but I knew that I didn't look beautiful like the bride. Nobody did. She just looked better than all of us, with a beauty bursting out of her because of the happiness inside her. Then when we came out of the church, we had a lot of photographs taken. I was on most of them, of course, but eventually I wasn't needed, and I stood aside, watching all the other groups having their photographs taken. It was then that I saw something I hadn't expected to see, just by the grubby old rose, that wild rose shrub with its pale pink flowers. There was my tramp. He looked so dreadful, so dirty, and I didn't know what to do. He beckoned me with his dirty old hand. I looked and didn't do anything at first, but he kept on, and so, looking round to make sure that no one could see me, I sidled over to him. He was fumbling in his holey trousers. "I want to show you something," he said, and then he pulled his hand out, and I could see what he was holding. It was a penknife, just like Dad used to use to cut the skin off dead lambs. Only it was bigger than Dad's. And as he flicked the blade, I could see steel, hard and shining. "Come here," he whispered. But this time it was very urgent, and he grabbed my hand. My little clean hand was in his big, dirty hand. He had never touched me before. My lovely cotton bridesmaid dress, with frills on its bodice, was crushed against his dirty trousers, and my white peep-toe sandals, which were not serviceable, were leaking squashy mud. I stared frozen to the ground, while my tramp slashed fiercely with his knife into the wild rose bush, till there was hardly anything left of it. Slash, slash he went, until all there was a knobbly root with a few broken shoots sticking up. Then he grabbed my posy. "There," he said, "that should do, my beauty." And he chose carefully 3 of the best roses. Then he did another funny thing. He neatly cut the flowers off. Why cut the flowers off? But he wanted the stems, and he jammed the bare stalks into the slashed old wild rose stems. Now that's what's called a graft, and you will see it's true that beauty comes from within. He smiled at last, his leather-cracked smile, and put one rose head in his buttonhole. Then he walked off on the road towards Hull. I heard his breathing for one last time. I wiped my sandals on some grass and ran back to Irene and the wedding party. And that, I thought, was the end of that. After the wedding, we all went to Ringham Hall for some tea, and Irene cuddled me and gave me a little present for being a good bridesmaid. I opened the box, and there was a little silver charm rose. I loved it, and I couldn't wait to put it on my charm bracelet. And that was the first thing I did when I got home. I never saw my tramp again. He had moved on, but I found out that it was not quite the end of that after all. You see, he had not been killed like my pet lamb had, who was my other friend. Dad said he would have gone to find more meat for work. And in any case, he had not quite gone from me, because he had left me a lovely surprise. One day, about a year later, when I went to Ringham Church, something caught my eye, just next to the lich gate. There were big red roses growing right from inside that ugly old wild rose root. It took your breath away. They were so beautiful and just like the roses in my bridesmaid posy. I didn't put good at being beautiful on my what I'm good at list, because I was not as beautiful as Irene. I just put being a good bridesmaid. It had been Irene who shone out as the most beautiful person, because of all the happiness she had inside her.